Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our podcast series about the pros of QT2 systems. Our featured guest today is Doug MacLean. Welcome, Doug.
Hey,
Thanks
how's it
for
going?
joining us today. It's
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
great. So I know we've talked before in other settings, but today we're going to spend some time talking about how you became a pro and your experience as a professional triathlete. So let's just start at the beginning. And can you talk a little bit about how you got into the sport of triathlon and your first few races?
Yeah, so I I was a rower in college and then I tried to keep rowing after college and I just kept hurting my lower back. And it was apparent that I couldn't keep rowing. Um and so I needed some other sport, but I didn't really think about it all that much. So I was at like a music festival with some of my friends from college. This was in '06, and my buddy Dan, um, he had done Placid the year before, and he went to Kona, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like I had heard of Ironman, but I didn't really know what it was. Um, I knew it involved swimming and biking, right? That's about it. Um, And then I was like, oh, if Dan can do it, then I can probably do it. Like, not in an arrogant sense, but like we were teammates. And so, pretty similar physical capacities. Um, so that was '06. And we were like, oh, let's sign up for an Ironman. Um, so I signed up for Coeur d'Alene and Placid in '07 because I was just dumb. I didn't know doing two Ironman in a month was ill-advised. But I did them and I got through them and it was okay. And then at that time also I was in grad school at University of Michigan, and old school QT tours will remember the name Ethan Brown. Um, he was Jesse's first pro. He was an ITU guy. So anyways, he was at Michigan at the same time as me. He was an undergrad on the track team, but he was also, because he had a background in swimming, he was also kind of moonlighting as a pro triathlete. Um, like he won under 23 nationals a couple times, things like that. And so, anyways, I was kind of getting into triathlon, and I just happened to go on. We were both in like the Michigan Triathlon Club. We did a couple workouts together, and I was like, "Oh, you're a pro. I didn't know that was a thing, but that's cool." And I just kind of got more and more into it, and one thing led to another. And so I had been working on a PhD in environmental engineering, but I just had this triathlon bug I had to scratch. And so I left Michigan in December of '08. I just took my master's and rolled out. My sister was in Boulder. Um, so she was like, come out to Colorado. And I was like, okay, sounds good. So I went out there, and at the time I was not like particularly good. Um, I had no coaching whatsoever. My PR, I think, was like I had done three Ironmen. I think my PR was like a nine, something in the 950s. Um, if even. No, it wasn't even that. I hadn't done that yet. So my PR was a 10:46 Ironman Lake Placid. And I was like, I can go pro. Um, and I just moved out to Colorado December of '08, and I just threw myself into it head first. I had luckily, so I had been in the Navy before that. And the good thing about being in the Navy is you get paid a salary and you're out at sea. And so you can't spend your salary, right? Like, so I was just every month just boom, 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 putting it into investments. And I saved up a nice little chunk of money. And so that kind of kept me afloat in terms of getting out to Colorado. And then my first few years there, I was really just living off that money I had saved up while I was getting more fit. Um, yeah, so I was kind of while I was living off my savings for that couple years, I was, you know, what people would call like the professional age grouper. I was racing as an age grouper, but I didn't do anything. I just trained 25 hours a week and I did some coaching on the side. And that was kind of the start of it. Yeah.
So, okay, there's so many crazy things in this. So first, the first triathlon you ever did was an Ironman. And you
No,
did,
no, no. Sorry. I shouldn't say that. So I signed the first triathlon I ever signed up for was an Ironman.
okay,
But then I was like, I should probably do some sort of like I was so naive, class. You probably heard this before. I didn't even know. I thought everybody who did triathlon just did Ironman,
okay.
right? Like it didn't occur to me that there were other distances. But then I was like, oh, there are. So I signed up for like a couple, just small local kind of Olympic distance and just to get my feet wet, that kind of a thing. Um, and then I think I had done in total, I want to say 4 triathlons before my first Ironman. So
Okay.
that was Coeur d'Alene '07. And I remember I went 10:59:33. Um, and then a month later was Placid where I went 10:46. I don't remember the seconds. Um, but I remember feeling like both races, I think what gave me the confidence that I could do it um, was I was a pretty good cyclist, at least for an age grouper, just because like rowers tend to make good cyclists. Um, there's a lot of crossover between the two. But then on the run in both races, like it's not like I got out and I was just running 11-minute miles off the bike. Both times I was going out and I was running like 7:30s for the first half. And my nutrition was like insane. I didn't know it was insane because if I knew it was insane, I wouldn't have done it. But like I was literally just eating payday bars and Red Bull and caffeine pills. That like in retrospect, it was nuts, right? Um, but like both races, I felt really good on the first lap of the run. And I think that's what kind of made me think, like, oh, I could actually be pretty good if I can just stretch out this run for another 10 or 15 miles. Um, and so, I just had that confidence in my back pocket. And that's kind of, I think, what made me believe in it. Yeah.
Okay.
You know.
So when you moved out to Colorado, you said you were training 25 hours a week. Well, were you coached at that point or were you figuring it out?
No. So my first 3 months in Colorado, I did an internship at Carmichael Training Systems. I
Okay.
think they're called Train Right now. It's like a big kind of, they're all right. But they had a lot of cachet at the time because Chris Carmichael um was like BFFs with Lance Armstrong and he was the owner. I mean, now being BFFs with Lance Armstrong is maybe not the best thing, but in '07 it
Back
was
then, yeah,
having a
it was a
wake. It
big
was like,
deal.
oh wow,
Yeah.
Um, so that was kind of cool. I did learn a lot there. I learned a lot about I had never heard of a power meter on a bike before I went there or anything like that. Um, so that did give me kind of a good starting, jumping off point. And then all of '09 and for the first half of 2010, I was just self-coached. And it wasn't anything, I bought that book, Total Immersion. I taught myself how to swim out of that. I had taken swimming lessons as a kid, but like a competitive swimmer. Um, and I just biked a lot and ran a lot, and that's about it.
Okay.
There wasn't anything really to it. So then I went to Louisville in '09. That was, I didn't race at all in '08 because I had like a stress fracture in my femur, I had shoulder surgery. It was a whole thing. Um, so after I did Placid in '07, I didn't race again until '09. I might have done a couple small local races, but my next like big race was Louisville, '09. I went 9:54, I want to say. And that was a pretty big breakthrough for me. Again, that was self-coached. I missed a Kona slot by 2 minutes. I didn't really care, but I was like, oh man. Um, and then a few weeks later, my buddy Ethan, who I had mentioned 5, 10 minutes ago, he he put my name in Jesse Kropelnicki's ear. And Jesse was like, oh, Doug, he's an engineer. I'm an engineer. He can figure this out. So we'll hire him. And so Jesse agreed to hire me. And then as part of that, like if you want to coach for QT2, you need to be coached by QT2. So you kind of live the style of training. And so Tim Snow started coaching me October 2010, I want to say. And then I raced Arizona 6 weeks later. I went 9:32 and I ran like I want to say like a 3:08 marathon. And I was like, okay, here we go. We got something here. Um, and I got my first Kona slot. So I took that. Um, and think I remember I heard through some rumor mill that Jesse thought my race at Arizona might have been a fluke. He was like, oh, he just had one good race. We don't know if he's really good. And then I raced Coeur d'Alene again the uh next summer. So that was June of 2010. And I beat Jesse by 20 minutes or something.
Ah, okay.
Suck it, J Crop. I had a good day there. I think I went right around 9:30, second or third in the age group. And then I raced Kona that fall. It went really well. At that point, I knew I had something. Like I did very, very serious heat prep in Boulder to the point where when I was racing in Kona, I was like, why does everybody say it's hot here? Like this is very comfortable. I borderline felt cool. Um, I went out, so that was October 2010. I remember I ran a 3:03 and I was dueling. I don't know if you remember Pat Wheeler. It was me, Pat Wheeler, and Tim Tapley were just like right on top of each other. And then I caught a cramp um, right at the top of that hill coming back on the Queen K, whatever that hill was that Dave Scott dropped Mark Allen on, or maybe Mark Allen dropped Dave Scott. I don't know. It's like mile 25. I caught a cramp there, and Pat and Tim just kind of pieced out on me. But I was like, okay, we're pretty good here. Then I just trained again all winter. I did the snowbird lifestyle where I lived in Boulder in the summer, and then every winter, Ethan and I would just pick a place to train in the winter. And it always ended up either being Tucson or Claremont. Um, and then 2000, I'm just rambling, but I guess that's the point.
Yeah, well, let me just back you up for a second,
Yeah.
though. When you said, so Tim started coaching you October of 2010, then you had the big race in Arizona shortly after. So what made the difference there with like, it sounded like that was sort of a breakthrough run for you to get your marathon time.
Yeah,
So
honestly, like I mean,
what was the
he
difference
started
there?
coaching me 6 weeks earlier, right? He's
Yeah,
not making
right,
real changes in my fitness.
right.
But he squared away my fueling
Okay.
and he just helped me navigate race pacing. I had never paced with heart rate or anything before. I just went entirely by feel. And I think, 3 months earlier, I had run, I want to say a 3:20 at Louisville, but then just simply getting fueling down and pacing by heart rate, I just dropped 12 minutes off my marathon just like that. Yeah. It's not like I was more fit. Nobody gets more fit in 6, 8 weeks.
No, I mean, for sure, but that was where, so you dropped the payday bars and the Red Bull and
Yes.
that's slightly better
Yeah, I was onto the
nutrition
power
strategy.
gels and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah,
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 yeah, yeah.
okay. All right, so I think so you were basically a professional age grouper for a
Mhm.
while. And then, so
Mhm.
how did you turn in then to a profession to actually earning your pro card?
I mean, as with everything in the sport, unless you're like a freak, it was just, you just keep chipping away, right? So I spent another winter in Florida with Ethan. We were just putting in our 27 to 30-hour weeks. I was getting ready for Ironman. He was getting ready for Olympic trials because he was an ITU guy. So we didn't really, the only thing we did together was swim. And when I say we swam together, that's a bit generous because he was way faster than me. Um, we were at the pool at the same time. I'll say that. Um, for all of you QT tours who have done the monster set, he would rip off the monster set on a 110 base send off per 100, which is just like cuckoo, like.
Yeah.
And for you non-QT tours, the monster set, it's 4,900 yards of just like you're banging it out on very short rest. And he was just clicking off those hundreds at 103, 105 pace on a 110 send off for 75 minutes. So if you want to race ITU, um, don't try until you can do that workout at that
Yeah.
pace. So anyways, I was supposed to race St. George that May. I was feeling really good. This nasty, nasty groin injury popped up. Wasn't able to do it. And that groin injury kind of became a recurring theme in my racing career. It would pop up every couple years. Um, but whatever. It wasn't like tragic. It's just like you can't run for 6 weeks. So I didn't do St. George. All I did was swim. I probably biked 18 hours a week, and then I was aqua jogging 6 or 7 hours a week. When you don't have a job, that's easy. You just go to the pool and I'm gonna aqua jog for an hour. And it's like no big deal, right? What else are you doing with yourself? Um, and I started running again mid-May. So, and I was like, all right, I can run. Let's roll Coeur d'Alene. So I signed up for it. I started running about 6 weeks out. And like, because I had kept up on my aqua jogging and my biking, within like 3 days of starting running again, I was as fast as I had ever been, you know? Like aqua jogging works.
It sure does.
It does. And all my athletes who I prescribe it to, I wouldn't give it to you if I hadn't been through it myself and know that it works. But you got to do it. You got to put in the time. It really activates those hip flexors. And so I went to Coeur d'Alene, June of 2011, and I just did my thing. I had Courtney, Pat Wheeler's wife. She was kind of my spotter. She was just telling me where I was in the race. I don't know where I was on the swim. I swam like a 105 or something. I was just ran 200th place or something. I don't know. I got out. I didn't panic on the bike. I just hit my power numbers, hit my heart rates. I knew there were people in front of me, but I got off the bike and Courtney was like, Doug, you're ninth amateur. And I was like, okay, let's do this. And I just went to work and I started doing my best Kate Snow impersonation. And I was just picking people off one by one. And then by mile, I don't know, somewhere midway through the second loop, I just took over the lead and I was first amateur. I remember I got a little cheeky and I ran with Crowy. I got on camera a little bit. Because why not, right?
Right.
I mean, he was a full lap in front of me. I wasn't like neck and neck with him. But we just happened to cross paths when he was 13 miles in front of me. And came across the line. I was first amateur, 9:19. And I remember that was a really big day because I got first amateur at Coeur d'Alene. Ethan won a World Cup. Maybe he was on the podium. I don't know if he won or if he was third, but he had a really good day at Montreal World Cup ITU race. So we were like texting each other and calling. We are like, woo, you know. And so for those of you unfamiliar, for the most direct route to get your pro license is you finish top three amateur at certain qualifying races, and this happened to be one of those qualifying races. So, um, I did it, and I immediately filed my paperwork, whatever, with USA Triathlon, and 2 weeks later, I had my pro license, and that was that. I started racing pro July of 2011.
All right, so you went straight from Coeur d'Alene
Yeah, yeah.
into the
About a
pro field.
month later, I did my first race, first pro race. It was TriStar, Minnesota. Um, I don't think that series exists anymore. But I went because I was like, oh, easy paycheck, because it was like a small field. There was like 8 or 9 male pros, and they were paying 5 deep. So I was like, giddy up. And it was 1,000 meter swim, which was perfect for me because swimming is my weakness. So, whatever. I remember Maka was there. I got a story about him. Um, so we do the swim, I get on the bike, and as you can expect with something called TriStar Minnesota, it wasn't the most well organized race. And I, along with half the pro field, went off the course on the bike. I added like 11 miles or something. So as soon as I figured that out, I was just like, all right, game over. Um, so I just biked back to transition, and then me and my buddy, who also went off course, we did like a tempo run workout. And then so Maka was at the race, and he he did the swim, and then he dropped out literally like a mile into the bike, and he was just sitting in transition. And I thought I was all cool because it was like, oh, I'm hanging out with Mecca. Um, he thinks I'm his peer, you know, and he's talking to us, and he's just like coming up with the most ridiculous excuses for why he dropped out of the race. He's like, my mechanic adjusted my seat wrong. I got out of transition and it was 2 inches too low, 2 inches too high, and I couldn't ride. And it was just like the most ridiculous, obvious BS excuse. Like, no, you, literally everybody, after they fly and build their bike, they get on it and they pedal and they make sure it's set up correct. Um, so and this was at a time when he was kind of famous for showing up to races, collecting an appearance fee, and then dropping out. And so it was obvious he did that again. And we were all just like, okay, Chris. Anyways, I don't really have a whole lot of bad things to say about him. That was just funny. That's all. I don't really have anything against him. He was nice enough, but it was just kind of funny. So then the first pro race I actually finished was about 5 weeks after that. It was Rev 3 Cedar Point, back when that had a nice prize purse. It was, I want to say, it was either 50 grand or 100 grand. So a lot of people showed up to Rev 3 races in those days. Obviously not the case now, but like they kind of really they changed things a bit because they were paying pros for sure. And I came in, I want to say 6th or 7th. I remember I got my first paycheck. I was really happy about that. It was $1,700, and that remains throughout my career the biggest check I ever got at a race.
Okay.
But it was cool. I had fun. Sorry, I got okay. You good? Yeah, so I guess you could in a way call that my first pro race because it's the first one I stayed on course and actually finished. Um, but yeah, and then it was just kind of off from there, you know? Yeah.
So when you showed up at the pro race and now you're surrounded by, I mean, people have been racing pro for a while, a lot of names that you've heard. And did you have any like were you anxious all about it or excited, or was like, what was sort of the feeling that you had?
No, I was just like, all right, let's do it.
Okay.
You know, I didn't have like delusions. I wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna beat Joe Gamble. It's like I didn't think that was gonna happen.
Mhm.
I'm gonna go out and beat Potts. Like I knew where I was in the pecking order, but I wasn't intimidated or scared. It was just, I had, I guess you could call it pre-race paranoia, but it was all about like equipment breakage. It wasn't like fearing the pain or the speed or anything like that. It was just like I was hyper paranoid about getting a flat tire. So I would put on a new set of tires every single race. Um, and when you're racing like 8, 9 times a year, like it's a lot of tires, right? Tires are not cheap. Luckily, I managed to talk my way into a sponsorship with Schwalbe. Um, they didn't give me money, not that I deserved money, but they gave me free tires, and I greatly appreciated that. And it saved me a lot of money, and it allowed me to do stuff like that. So yeah, my only pre-race paranoia was just related to equipment. It wasn't. I never feared anything about the race itself, or the people who were in it. Like if there were good people there, like it got me excited, because it made me feel, all right, this is the big time now, you know. You're not racing the local sprint in Ann Arbor, Michigan, or whatever. Yeah, yeah.
So when you're, I mean, when you're talking about your race as an amateur, your last race at Coeur d'Alene, and it was about, picking people off on the bike and on the run. In the pro field, it's not, that can't be your motivation, right? I mean, to try to, I mean,
I mean, it
at
has to
some,
be.
sure, but there's a lot less of them and,
Right, right, but it has to be
but,
because I was so poor, weak on the swim. Um, like if I was racing age group, people would say, "Wow, he's a great swimmer. He swam 56 minutes or whatever in an Ironman." But like as a pro, you're off the back swimming 56 minutes. You don't you see people at the start line and then you don't see them again until the finish line. Because they're just gone. Those guys swim in 51 minutes. And like so much of it is if you so the way the pro swim shakes out is and this is a big part of the reason um people a lot of age groupers they get a time at a race and then they compare their time to the pro times and they're like I beat 17 pros and like the the pro race and the age group race it's apples and oranges there race like back it off like you're a good athlete but they ain't the same thing. So the first 500 meters of every pro swim is absolutely bananas because people get out and they want to get in a fast pack and they don't want to let you get into their fast pack.
okay.
So if you can't swim that first 500 meters at say like, oh, I don't know, 105, 110 per 100 meters. So maybe like one flat per 100 yards, forget it. You're not making the front pack. Um, if you can swim at maybe 115 per 100 meters, you could make the second or third pack. Um, and every once in a blue moon, I would make the second or third pack, but it was pretty unusual. And most of my swim training, honestly, was geared at because after that first 500 meters, it really settles down
Okay.
because the packs have formed. People know they've gotten rid of who they can get rid of. And also, they're just gassed from sprinting for 500 meters. And then you just kind of settle in, get on someone's hip, get on their feet, and just, all right, this is who I'm with for the next 2.4 miles. Um, and so you do that. And of course, the swim itself, if somebody beats me out of the water by 5 minutes, it's a 9-hour race, right? It doesn't matter, right? But it does matter because packs form on the bike. And that's why the swim matters. And they say it's not draft legal, but it is. It's draft pro racing is draft legal. It's just you have to draft at 12 meters. Like let's not kid ourselves. Drafting has a very big impact on the pro race. Um, it's not the 30 to 40% benefit you would get from riding in a straight up Peloton, like 2 inches off someone's wheel. But if I remember, studies show it's, maybe about 10% power saving still at 12 meters. And like, you better believe that matters. And so I would just, more often than not, I was getting out of the water with the stragglers. Maybe there would be three or four of us. I don't think I was ever last out of the water, but a lot of times it was just, you know, it wasn't a tight pack like the leaders would come out. And so I didn't really have anyone to work with on the bike. Every once in a blue moon, I would get someone, and it was so effing frustrating because, especially on the courses, like say with out and backs on the bike, so you can see. So, say I'm going out, I'm at mile 10, I'm riding by myself, I'm pushing 290 watts. Um, and then there's an out and back. I see a pace line of 8 guys coming back. They're 3 miles ahead of me already. And I know not only are they going 2 miles an hour faster than me, but they're only probably pushing 240 watts. And so they're going faster than me and using less energy to do it. And it's just like, if you can't accept that and deal with it and accept that that's reality and that's just what you have to live with, then you're not going to last more than a season or two as a pro, honestly. And so I would just live with that. And that was my mentality. It was just, I'm just going to do my thing on the bike. Um, and then I knew I had this ace in my, back pocket, which was the run. And so at the time, I was always running 301, 302, which at the time was a pretty good Ironman marathon. This is before the carbon plated super shoes, and the sport just wasn't quite as deep either. So I could run down a lot of people if I was running three flat in an Ironman. Nowadays, if you run three flat, it's like, oh, that's cute. Yeah. Good job, way to go, champ. But 2012, 2013, that was quick. And so no, I would never. I did run my way into like a few podiums, top five, whatever. But in general, it would just be I would say there were 20 guys at a race, I would maybe run my way into like 11th place or something. So I wasn't getting paid, but it was also like, yeah, okay, he belongs here. He's legitimate. I felt good about myself. I mean, of course, I was frustrated about not getting paid, but I didn't feel bad about my abilities.
I think that that's a good segue into the money piece of it, right? So you're coming in, you're racing the pro field. You don't, I mean, as a pro, you're not salaried, right? I mean, so
No.
you have to make money by winning, or I mean,
Mhm.
getting on the podium,
Mhm.
sponsorships,
Mhm.
right? I mean, so what did you do then to like to make your money if you weren't?
I coached.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, coaching for QT2 was probably 80% of my income
Okay.
as a pro. Um, any money I got from races, and I would get a couple paychecks a year, but they always amounted to maybe my yearly race winnings for maybe $2,000 or $3,000. It's nice, but it's not covering anything. Um, the only sponsor who ever straight up paid me was Cliff Bar. All my other sponsors were product. And not to say I'm bitter, like that's all I deserved, right? I was a mid-pack pro. I'm not I'm not really moving the needle for a lot of companies in terms of getting that exposure. So if they're sending me tires or bike frames or whatever, I take what I can get. I can get shoes, anything. Um, yeah, Cliff Bar was the only monetary. I loved working with Cliff Bar. They make good stuff, nice people. Um, and I haven't had a relationship with them in like 7 years, so I'm not getting paid to say this. It is genuine. I love how they run their business. Yeah, and I think, yeah, like the pros you see in magazines or like on broadcasts, most of them can probably make scratch by a living. Maybe not. Like if you're racing Ironman, honestly, you've got to be like a top 15 Kona quality athlete to even really have a hope of making a living just off of racing. Um, like on an annual basis. Like, yeah, maybe you go to Kona one year, you have one good year where you make 90,000 in prize purse, but then the next year you go right back to making 20,000. I'm talking about the people who can like the Lindsay Corbins who can make a real career out of just racing. They're the people who go, it's the people who go to Kona every year they're in the hunt, top 10, top 15. And they're going to, they're kind of regulars on podiums at Placid, Coeur d'Alene, Austria, or Western Australia. They're if someone is not a regular on the podium and occasionally winning races, like forget it. They're not. They're either making money off of coaching or they're getting paid by mom and dad, and that's just the reality of it. I don't
So
know
then,
how. I mean, there are a lot of pros who are professional children. They're getting, supported by mom and dad. I don't know exactly who they are or exactly how many there are, but it is a significant percentage for sure. Because it is tough to make money. It
yeah.
is
So then
it
what?
is a harsh lesson in capitalism.
So then why do it, right? I mean, when you think professional, you think you're being paid. I mean, that's sort of the concept. So what's the benefit and the motivator for racing?
Yeah, I mean it's no different than the people who race age group, right?
Mhm.
Like you just you just enjoy it and you want to see how good you can be. Um, and then like just for whatever reason, you know, everybody when they're a kid, they want to be something. And I just always wanted to be a pro athlete. And while I was obsessive about basketball growing up, and like I was pretty good, it became abundantly clear that as a, you know, 6'3" white guy, I wasn't, the NBA was not in my future. I'll say that. It became abundantly clear that, that wasn't happening. And I saw that I was pretty good at triathlon. And I was like, this is when I was still at Michigan. I said, this is my shot to be a pro athlete. I don't know if I can do it, but this is as good as a shot as I'm going to get in any sport. And so it was kind of not that I particularly loved triathlon. It was just the avenue that I happened to be good at, you know. Um, I would have much rather been in the NBA. I mean, who
Oh,
wouldn't,
well,
right?
sure.
Yeah. But that didn't quite pan out. My basketball career ended after senior year of high school.
All right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
how many years did you race pro?
So technically, I was a pro from 2011 through 2019, 8 years. But the reality is, I was a glorified age grouper those last 3 years because 2016, I was 36, and it was apparent that, if I hadn't won an Ironman by then, I wasn't going to win one in the future, right? Like the writing was on the wall. Uh, Maybe I could keep performing at a similar level, but I wasn't going to keep climbing. So I went and I got a normal, boring office job in 2016. 40, 45 hours a week, commuting 45 minutes each way every day. Um, all of that. I kept coaching also. And, I was able to hang on to my fitness. So I was able to race pro for another 3 years after I started working full time. Um, But for all intents and purposes, my pro career ended summer of 2016 because that's when I went into the office. Yeah.
So is there a race, I mean, over the course of those 8 years that's like super memorable for you?
Yeah. I mean, there's a few. Um, I remember Ironman Boulder in 2018. This was, I was just going through a lot in my life on the side. It's not worth getting into, like, it's not that dramatic. But I was dealing with a lot of stuff. And, I had been in the office for a couple years and honestly, I hated it and I was miserable. Um, and I went out to Boulder and I stayed with AJ, AJ Baco. We were good BFFs. Um, he was always up for letting me crash at his place, all that kind of stuff. Um, and I was out there for like I took a big like 2 week break so I could acclimate and do all this stuff. And I just kind of got back into the flow of what it felt like to be a pro. Because I was out there for 2 weeks and I was doing nothing but training. And I just started ripping off these like I don't know, QT tours, over unders where you're going like mile zone one, mile zone two, miles and running. And my zone 2 miles, like at altitude, I was running mid 550s. And I was like, okay, we might have something here. Um, and I got out and it was just a disgusting day. It was 85 degrees or something at the start line. By the time we were running, it was in the upper 90s. And it's Colorado. There's no shade. There's no clouds. It's 97, 98 degrees and direct sunlight. Um, and I remember Tim was there, which I always love when Tim is at races. He's great. He just, he makes me feel comfortable and he's a great cheerleader, all that kind of stuff. Um, I got off the bike. I don't know what place I was in, maybe 20th or something, Um, as per usual, I was nowhere close to winning. That was expected. Um, and I don't know if QT Tours may know Trevor Delso. He's a French guy, super friendly. I like Trevor a lot. We kind of got off the bike pretty close together, and he took off out of transition. Like he was like, "All right, I'm going." I took off out of transition, and I went straight to zone R. I was running like because I read the conditions. I knew what was going on. I went like 7:45 pace for the first 5 or 6 miles. And I remember I saw Tim and I saw Ben Hoffman and I saw someone else I know. And they were all like, Doug, are you okay? And I was like, I got this. I got this. I'm good. Because I was getting passed by people and people were dropping me. And then after mile 5, I was like, okay, ease into it. I can start lifting the heart rate, lifting the heart rate. And then around mile 10, I didn't even get into zone 1 until like mile 10. Because I was just reading the conditions and playing it super safe. And I just started kind of picking people off, picking people off. And I just kept on like kind of turning the dial a little bit more each mile. And so by the time I remember I passed Justin Metzler, who I also like, good friend. I like Justin a lot. I caught him around mile 16 or 17. He was having a rough day because I think he went out a bit too aggressive. And I was like, gotcha. Because, like friendly rivalry stuff, not like um, not actual animosity. And then I got to like mile, I don't know, 21 or 22. No, it was like mile 22. No, mile 23. I see Tim. And Tim is like, Trevor is a minute and a half up the road. Go get him. And I was like, Tim, what are you talking about? I'm not going to make up 90 seconds in 5K. But I was like, okay, well, Tim said it, so I'm going to do it. And I just kind of, flipped the switch. I had been running, I don't know, maybe 7:10s at that point. And then I just started going like 6:40s. I was like, we're fucking going for it.
Yeah.
Mile goes by, another mile goes by, and all of a sudden I'm at like mile 24 and a half or so. All of a sudden I can see Trevor. And I'm like, okay, I've made up a good minute on him in the last mile and a half. I can do this. Um, and then like like a minute or two later, I see Crowy, and he doesn't know who I am. He just knows I'm just some anonymous pro to him. Right? And at this point, Trevor is like maybe 50 meters up the road from me, and Crowy's like, "Just go fucking get him!" And I'm like, "Oh, well, Crowy said that."
Well, then, okay.
Okay. So then I find another gear,
Uh-huh.
and I mow down Trevor in the next 2 minutes later or something, and I'm just trucking past him. I build up a lead, and then literally a quarter mile from the finish line, just one of my hamstrings, I forget which one, just went bump, you know. No. So I do my tricks. I start stretching out. I'm jogging backwards, and eventually it loosens up enough where I can kind of just hobble into the finish line, and I hold off Trevor, and I end up finishing 10th. And again, I know for like a full-time pro, that's not great. But for me, like someone who's working full-time in an office, I'm 38 years old, like I was like, yeah, that's really good. And I was maybe 2 minutes behind AJ. If the course was a mile and a half longer, I would have caught him. And so we got to finish together and hang out. And like it was just really like it was a good day, it was really fun. And my sister was there with her kids because they live in Denver, so they came down and watched. And it was really great, you know.
Mhm.
Um, I didn't get a paycheck or anything, but like I was really proud of it. Just how
Yeah.
I handled the conditions, how I paced the run. And I ended up having like I want to say the third or fourth best run of the day, and it was like a 3:08 or something. Just to give you an idea of the conditions, like normally a 3:08 is like, oh man, you injured?
Yeah.
That kind of a thing. But like that on that day, a 3:08 was fast as hell. Um, and then the other one I remember really as a highlight was Roth 2019. Like Challenge Roth, it's like a bucket list race, right? Um, so I went over there with two of my athletes, Justin Arnosky, Damon Little. Like we got a little, we rented an Airbnb in Nuremberg, maybe half an hour away from Roth. Justin thought I was an idiot because I didn't have an international cell phone, so I didn't know how to get anywhere. He had to do all the navigation. And all I wanted to do there was go and run sub 3 because I had run 3 flat, 3:01, 3:02, 3:03 more times than I can count. I ran 3 hours and 15 seconds at Chattanooga. And for anyone who's raced Chattanooga, that is not a fast run course. Like 3 hours and 15 seconds there is like a legit run. And I was like, you have to be kidding me. So I was like, I'm going to Roth and I'm going under 3. And that's all there is to it. Um, so it kind of played out as my typical race. Um, you know, we started 3 minutes before the women. I remember Lucy Charles passed me at like, we started 3 minutes before the women. Lucy Charles passed me at like 1,000 meters. She was gone. Uh, I like, I don't need, a lot of times when female pros would pass me, I would try to latch onto their feet, but her, I was like, no, let's not kid ourselves here. This is not happening. Do the bike and Justin, he is a age grouper, but a very, very good age group. He swam, I want to say like 50 flat or something. Like it was literally the third fastest swim in the entire field, including pros. I think only Jan Sipperson and Andy Potts outswam him. Or he might have even outsplit pots or something crazy. Anyways, he had a phenomenal swim. So he caught me on the bike, even though we started in front of him, and we biked together a lot. And one of my favorite memories, I bought the race photo. Solar Hill at Challenge Roth. It's the one. It's like the Tour de France style hill where the crowds are like 10 people deep. We rode up Solar Hill. It's just the perfect timing, right together. And like, there's a photo of us riding right together, me and Justin, and the crowds are like, whoa! And it's just like the coolest photo. I love it. So we do that. We finish the bike, and then I was like, all right, we're doing this. And I just took it out and I just started kicking off 630s. Bang, 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 bang. I was like, I feel good, but it's a little aggressive, so we're going to dial it back because I don't need 630s to go under 3. So then I dialed like low 640s. And then right around mile 14 or 15, I was like, this is happening. Like, I'm not falling apart. For those of you who have raced Roth, there is a devilish hill around mile 22. And I think I might have even been over 8 minutes on that mile. And there was a little part of me that had a tiny panic. But I got myself together right after that. And then around mile 25, I was like, I got this. And I came across and I ran a 2:57:20. And I was just like, this is great. This is wonderful. I finally did it. Check. And I felt like that was the last thing I really wanted to do as a pro was just really get under 3, and I did it pretty emphatically. So I was really happy with that. And then I did race Lake Placid a month later. But like, I was not only was I fatigued from Roth, I didn't really train much between the two. I just I honestly, I used it as like a glorified victory lap because it's such like a QT2 race. I just wanted, it felt good as my last pro race, to have kind of everyone there and that kind of stuff.
All right, so celebration, Lake Placid, last finish. I know, so I'm gonna just ask you a couple real quick questions and I'll let you go. So, if you had to do it again, would you? Would
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. I mean, I would approach my finances differently because I made some good decisions, but I also made some dumb decisions, right? But the racing and all of that in and of itself, I would absolutely do again. I would just take the financial lessons I learned and kind of apply them and be a bit smarter about it.
Well, that's probably ties into the next question, which is if you had advice for your younger self.
My advice for my younger self, it would be I probably should have stayed at Michigan, honestly, until I earned my pro card. If nothing else, because as a PhD student in engineering, I was getting a monthly salary, and that would have been nice. And living was cheap. I had like 6 roommates. I was paying, I don't know, 600 a month in rent. That probably would have been a good idea. I think I would have. Yeah, that's honestly it. I just would have tightened up my spending a little bit and focused more on other avenues of income beyond just coaching. Because especially then, it was like kind of the wild, wild west. It was really the early days of social media. And so if you were putting anything out on social media, sponsors loved it and they would give you money. And I just didn't really latch on to that trend quite early enough. But as far as my approach to training and racing, I wouldn't, I think I got everything I could out of my body. I went the only way I could have been faster is if I had been introduced to the sport at an age younger than 26. Like that was my handicap, right? Like if I had started when I was 15, I'm sure my career would have played out differently. But it didn't. I didn't start when I was 15. I started when I was 26 and can't change that. That's just how it went. Yeah.
Yeah, but you did, you were a professional athlete, so you lived that,
Hmm.
you lived that dream and you'll be
Yeah.
able to tell your kids about it in the future and
Yeah, I'm sure they'll, well, I don't know. Maybe they'll think my photos are cool or something, right?
yeah.
Or my racing kits. I'm sure when they're like 11, they'll love putting them on and like, "Ooh, look at me," that kind of thing. Yeah.
So you saved them?
What's that?
You saved your racing kits?
Some of them. I did get rid of I got rid of probably half of them, but I kept a representative sample. Like I kept one from each year because I had a different kit each year. So I just wanted to remember the designs I raced in each year.
Yeah.
And then my wife had a blanket made for me out of a bunch of race t-shirts. So that's kind of fun. Just little mementos. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. Thank you so much, Doug, for spending the time and talking about your career as a pro and how you got there. And it tells you, you put in the time, you work hard, you know?
Yeah. I mean, there's a certain like obvious kind of uh, price of admission or entry barrier or something like there are certain people like um say like somebody who's like I don't know a star football player and just has that like football player build or someone like that like they could train perfectly and do everything perfectly and they're just never gonna make it as a pro. They just don't have the right body type. Just in the same sense, like I could live, eat, and breathe football. I'm never going to make it as a pro football player. I'm just not that body type. So, and a certain like ability to process oxygen and all that kind of stuff. But once you hit that kind of like price of admission, yeah, it's just you just put in the time and have the ability to reflect on yourself and accept feedback and criticism, even if it's not in words, because every time you race and, you know, lose to Torenzo Bizzoni by 20 minutes, like that's feedback, that's criticism, that's helping you evaluate what you're doing in your training and what you need to change about your training and racing. And it's really humbling, but if you learn to view it as constructive feedback, it's also going to help you develop and grow. So you just got to stay positive and confident without being delusional, is I guess how you got to do it. Yeah. Because if you're
Okay.
delusional, you're gonna crack after a year or two. If you're like, I'm gonna go win 3 Ironmen this year, and you finish 12th. Um, if you still think you're gonna win, you're just gonna eat yourself alive with disappointment and anger. So you do have to be realistic about what your abilities are, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of good lessons in there. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
all right, well, thanks for taking the time. I'll let you get back to full-time dad now.
Yeah. Well, I finally got him quiet, and now, yeah. Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
yeah. Anyways, well, thanks for chatting.
All
I'm
right.
sure I talked over you. I'm sorry. Once
No,
I get going, forget it. Nobody's getting a word in.
that's okay.
Yeah.
All right, thanks a lot, Doug.
All right. Thank you. Bye.